Picture this, a desert so harsh, so relentless, so brutally unforgiving that even the most optimistic agronomist on Earth would tell you farming here is scientifically impossible. The temperature regularly hits 45 degrees Celsius. The rains last barely 4 months of the year. The soil is cracked, pale and bone dry for the remaining 8. For 60 years, every government that tried to change this reality ended up running to Paris, Geneva, or Washington with their hands out. And for 60 years, the answer was always the same. Take the loan, accept the conditions, stay dependent. But right now, in the middle of that very same desert, something is happening that the entire world was told could never happen. Giant machines are cutting through ancient earth. Engineers are designing a waterway so massive, so ambitious, so historically unprecedented that when completed, it could permanently transform the driest region in West Africa into one of the most productive agricultural zones on the planet. This is Burkina Faso's $1 billion canal project, and the man behind it is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young military leader who took power in 2022 with one single promise: this nation will feed itself. Welcome. This is Arisen Now. To understand why this canal matters so much, you first need to understand the trap Burkina Faso has been living in for generations. Burkina Faso sits at the edge of the Sahara. It is landlocked, surrounded by 8 countries with no access to the sea. For centuries, this geography was treated as a death sentence by the outside world. No port, no easy trade routes, no natural harbor to attract foreign investment. And because of that, the colonial logic was simple and cruel. Extract the gold, extract the cotton, leave everything else to rot. So here's what that deal looked like in practice after 60 years of so-called independence. Burkina Faso was importing 70% of its rice, nearly 700,000 metric tons of Asian rice arriving on ships and trucks every single year just to keep the population alive. They were spending $75 million annually importing 193,000 tons of wheat, mostly from France and Poland, to make their own bread. They were bleeding $50 million per year buying powdered milk from European factories. And all of this was happening in a country that sits on roughly 500,000 hectares of highly developable lowlands. Let that number sink in for a moment. 500,000 hectares of land that could have been farmed. 500,000 hectares of soil that could have fed not just Burkina Faso but its entire neighborhood. But for decades, less than 10% of that land was ever touched. The water was there. The land was there. The people were there. What was missing was the will and the infrastructure to connect them all. That is what makes what is happening right now so extraordinary, because the will finally arrived. And his name is Ibrahim Traoré. September 30th, 2022, a single gunshot. A young captain in a red beret steps forward and changes the direction of an entire nation. Ibrahim Traoré did not arrive with a manifesto written by foreign consultants. He did not arrive with a development plan drafted by IMF economists in Washington. He arrived with something far more dangerous to the old order. A simple, devastating question. Why does our gold leave this country, but our people still go hungry? Before Traoré, Burkina Faso had spent over 60 years in an arrangement that made perfect sense to the people collecting the benefits. France controlled the CFA franc, the currency used across 14 West African nations. Foreign companies extracted gold from Burkina-Bay soil and shipped the profits to European shareholders. Agricultural engineers sat in air-conditioned offices in Ouagadougou, writing reports that nobody implemented. Meanwhile, the farmers in the north watched their crops fail every drought season and had no option but to wait for the next foreign food shipment to arrive. Traoré saw this arrangement for exactly what it was: a system designed to maintain dependence, not build prosperity. So he did something that absolutely terrified Western governments. He broke the system. He expelled the French military forces that had been stationed in Burkina Faso for decades. He nationalized the gold mines, stripping control from foreign corporations and redirecting those revenues into the state budget. He canceled contracts with multinational agricultural companies that had been benefiting from Burkina-Bay land without benefiting Burkina-Bay people. And then he looked at the map of his country, saw all that water trapped in dams and rivers that nobody was connecting, and said, "We are going to build a canal." But Traoré did not wait for the canal to start the revolution. He understood that you cannot transform an agricultural nation overnight with one single mega project. You need to build the transformation in layers. So while the canal vision was being designed, he launched something equally audacious: the agro-pastoral and fisheries offensive, Nearly $1 billion, not borrowed from the World Bank, not gifted by foreign nations, not tied to any conditions, funded directly from Burkina Faso's own state revenues, specifically from the nationalized gold mines. The scale of what this initiative deployed is almost difficult to comprehend. In 2024 alone, the government handed farmers 400 tractors, 239 power tillers, and over 700 water pumps, all free of charge. Captain Traoré confirmed this himself, looking directly at the farmers and saying, "These tractors will be used to plow your land for free. Our objective is true food self-sufficiency." That was just the beginning. Then came nearly 69,000 tons of fertilizer, 18,000 tons of improved hybrid seeds, thousands of tons of fish feed and animal fodder, all given away. No loans, no conditions. And when you see the footage of these distributions, the rows and rows of gleaming tractors lined up in the heat, the farmers climbing into the cabs for the first time, the pride on their faces, you start to understand that this is not just agriculture. This is psychological liberation. But what happened next shocked even the engineers who designed the program. In May 2025, Traoré escalated everything. He handed over 608 more tractors, another round of equipment valued at nearly $180 million. Total investment in farm equipment alone had crossed $300 million. All of it from nationalized gold revenue, all of it free. And when a U.S. general named Michael Langley publicly complained on camera that Burkina Faso's government was misusing its gold reserves, something became crystal clear. They were not misusing the gold. They were using it for the exact purpose that gold should serve: to feed the people it was dug from the earth to serve. Here is the truth that nobody in the development industry wants to admit. Burkina Faso does not have a farming problem. It has a water distribution problem. The country receives rain. It has rivers. It has massive dam reservoirs holding billions of cubic meters of water. The problem is geography. The rain falls in the south and the west, where the land is relatively humid, but the population that needs food the most lives in the north and the center, where the land touches the edge of the Sahara and rainfall is desperately thin. For 60 years, this imbalance was treated as simply the way things are. Traoré decided to treat it as an engineering problem with an engineering solution. And that solution begins with water infrastructure. Look at what they have already built. The Douro perimeter sits less than 100 miles from the brutal edge of the Sahara Desert. It shouldn't exist. Nothing about the landscape suggests farming is possible here. And yet this irrigation system is powered by a solar pumping station that delivers an incredible 9,720 cubic meters of water every single hour. 9,720 cubic meters. Every hour. You need to imagine that for a moment. That is water enough to flood multiple football fields every 60 minutes, arriving by solar power in one of the driest zones in West Africa. The result is an 800-hectare landscape completely underwater with rice paddies stretching to the horizon. Then there is the Bagre Dam and its associated growth pole, located 245 kilometers southeast of the capital. This is not a small project. This is a strategic hub. The Bagre Reservoir holds 1.7 billion cubic meters of water on the White Volta River. 1.7 billion. They use a mix of massive gravity-fed canals, solar pumps, automated irrigation systems, and laser land leveling technology. They even use satellite monitoring and IoT sensors to optimize every single drop of water that flows through the system. In 2025 alone, Bagre produced nearly 12,000 tons of rice, and the Daya perimeter in Burkina's Nord region, just a few miles from the Sahara's actual edge, now covers 2,240 hectares of irrigated land. They use Archimedean screw pumps to lift water from the Serba River. From there, it flows through a gravity-fed network of canals and drains. Yields there have exploded. Some farmers are reporting incomes 177% higher than what they earn from rain-fed farming. Think about that. 177% more income. Not because they worked harder, because they finally had water exactly when and where they needed it. But all of these individual projects, as impressive as they are just fragments, pieces of a puzzle. And the puzzle, when fully assembled, becomes something that has no parallel in modern African history. Now we arrive at the project that is making geopolitical analysts around the world take notice. The project that engineers are calling the most ambitious terraforming initiative in West Africa since the construction of the Aswan Dam in Egypt, the billion-dollar canal. Here is the vision. Burkina Faso sits between a relatively humid south and an almost completely arid north. In the south and west, massive dam reservoirs like Bagre, Ziga, and Samandeni hold trapped oceans of fresh water. In the north, the land is cracking under drought. Villages are struggling. Farmland is turning to dust. The canal vision is to connect these trapped reservoirs into a single unified water artery, a man-made river that moves water from the humid south to the dying north. A permanent hydro highway flowing from west to east, from south to north and back. The technical proposal involves linking the great reservoirs of Burkina Faso through an engineered canal network running through the Blaise Compaoré Valley. If fully realized, this waterway would supply water to millions of hectares of farmland that currently produce nothing. It would create a permanent agricultural corridor across the Sahel. It would break the back of the drought cycle that has strangled northern Burkina Faso for generations. Visionaries working on this project describe it in the most ambitious possible terms. They call it the plan to make the Sahel look like the Nile does for Egypt. Think about what the Nile means for Egypt. A desert civilization that built pyramids, fed empires, and sustained hundreds of millions of people across thousands of years because of one river. One consistent, dependable, life-giving flow of water cutting through otherwise dead land. That is exactly what this canal proposes to create for West Africa. Not just for Burkina Faso, because the vision does not stop at national borders. The military engineers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the three nations of the Alliance of Sahel States, are reportedly cooperating on the grand design. If executed together, this canal system would become a transnational water network connecting three nations that the Western world has written off as beyond saving. It would stand as the greatest terraforming achievement in African history. And the most remarkable part of all of this? There is no IMF loan involved, no World Bank structural adjustment condition attached, no foreign engineering firm taking 80% of the contract value back to Paris or London. This is being designed by Burkinabe engineers, funded by Burkinabe gold revenue, and built for Burkinabe farmers. The canal is sovereignty in physical form. But before the canal is complete, the transformation is already happening on the ground. And the people making it happen are not who you would expect. They are soldiers. In Burkina Faso today, every single military base operates under strict executive orders to produce its own food. Think about that for a moment. In most countries, feeding the military is one of the largest budget items a government carries. You need massive procurement contracts, supply chains, foreign food imports, logistics networks. It costs billions. Traoré eliminated that entire drain with one executive order. Grow your own food. The military is now the agricultural labor force. More than 3,000 military personnel, including combat engineers and the civilian militia known as the VDPs, the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, were deployed directly to work alongside 4,000 internally displaced persons. Together, these battalions cleared, plowed, and harvested over 11,000 hectares of strategic farmland. The military's heavy machinery, the same bulldozers and excavators meant for combat engineering, were redirected to terraform and cultivate land at a scale that civilian farmers could never achieve alone. But there is a dimension to this that goes deeper than economics. In the Sahel, terrorist groups and jihadist insurgents have weaponized hunger as a military tactic for years. They blockade villages. They prevent farmers from reaching their fields. They destroy harvests. Starvation as a weapon of war. Traoré's response to this was as elegant as it was ruthless. He gave the farmers an armed escort. Permanently. The VDP militia operate under what their commanders call a dual mandate, the rifle and the plow. They clear the land of insurgent presence. They form armed perimeters. And then, when the area is secured, they get down in the dirt and plant seeds themselves. As of April 2026, over 4,600 of these agricultural VDPs, including hundreds of women, have graduated from a rigorous training program that fuses agronomic science with military discipline, fighting terrorism by planting seeds. The concept is so simple, it is almost shocking that nobody thought of it before. But it took a 20-something military captain in a red beret who refused to accept the old limits to make it happen. But the mobilization does not stop with soldiers. Traoré looked at every single institution in his country and asked the same question. What is this institution doing to feed the nation? And nowhere was that question more unexpected than when he walked into a prison. The Baparo Penitentiary Center was, before Traoré, exactly what its colonial architecture suggested. A holding cell. People went in, served their time, came out with fewer skills and fewer prospects than when they entered. Traoré refused to accept that model. He walked in, looked around, and transformed the entire facility. Inmates are now trained in agricultural techniques. They learn to grow and care for crops using modern farming tools. And the results are not symbolic. They are real and measurable. The inmates of Baporo have cultivated a 40-hectare cornfield in the middle of a dry area. 40 hectares. From a prison. This is what total national mobilization looks like when it is done with genuine intent. Not a single institution is allowed to be passive. Every school, every university, every ministry, every military base, every prison, all of them are now part of the agricultural revolution. Agricultural engineers who used to sit in air-conditioned offices in the capital have been transferred directly into rural cooperatives. The government even provided them with motorbikes to reach the most remote farming communities. Because what was the point of having the engineers if the engineers never reached the farms? Let's talk about results, because this is where the story stops being inspirational and starts being irrefutable. In 2024, Burkina Faso produced 6 million tons of cereals. 6 million tons. That is more than enough for the entire domestic consumption of the population. A nation that was importing 70% of its rice just a few years ago is now producing enough cereals to feed itself and is working toward export surplus. By late April 2026, the Burkinabe government made an announcement that nobody predicted when Traoré first took power. They halted all rice imports from abroad, completely. Not reduced, not limited, halted. This is not a policy decision driven by politics. It is a production decision driven by the fact that they simply do not need foreign rice anymore because they are growing enough of their own. The wheat story is just as staggering. Western agronomists spent decades telling African governments that growing wheat in the Sahel was climatically impossible. It was, they said, simply not compatible with the temperatures and rainfall patterns. Traoré launched a domestic wheat experiment in 2023 with just 125 hectares. The experiment worked. By 2024, the government scaled to 1,342 hectares, yielding nearly 2,600 tons of wheat directly from Burkinabe soil. And to make sure they never have to beg foreign seed companies again, they launched a 5,000-hectare wheat seed production bank. Sovereignty over seeds, sovereignty over soil, sovereignty over water. That is the formula. And on the processing side, the numbers are equally dramatic. The Minifa wheat factory tripled its annual capacity from 9,000 tons to 32,000 tons. The Kamsila rice processing facility swallows and processes 400 tons of rice every single day, making it one of the top 10 largest rice processing facilities in all of Africa. These are not promises. These are operational plants running right now. And the projection for the 2025 to 2026 season? 2.68 million tons of maize, 2.4 million tons of sorghum, over 1 million tons of paddy rice, 1.1 million tons of millet. Total cereal production pushing past 6 million tons every year, consistently. Now I need to tell you something that sounds like it cannot possibly be true. But stay with me, because every single word of this is real. Burkina Faso is growing apples, real apples, in the Sahara. For generations, the global agricultural establishment was very clear about this. Apples require temperate climates. They need cold winters to trigger their growth cycles. They cannot survive in sub-Saharan heat. It was not a theory. It was presented as biological fact. And yet, in the demonstration farms set up by Burkina Faso's agricultural ministry, specifically designed to prove to the world that the desert is just a mindset, they planted apple trees. They started with just 2 trees. 2 trees, but they are reporting confident developments. The trees are growing. The irrigation infrastructure from the Bagre and Ziga dams is creating the microclimates that these crops need. A local farmer at one of these centers explained it simply and powerfully on camera. For decades, people believed cultivating apples, coffee, and cocoa was geographically impossible in Burkina Faso. That is what we are trying to change, to show the world that it is possible. And right beside those experimental apple trees, Mercedes cocoa plants are thriving alongside banana plantations after just 3 months of precise irrigation. Strawberries are growing in the dry heat. Coffee is being cultivated in a country that was never supposed to produce coffee. The Ananasa Faso pineapple project spans 23 hectares in the middle of an arid landscape and is producing some of the largest, sweetest pineapples you will ever see. Workers wrap each pineapple in individual paper bags labeled Ananasa Faso, protecting them from the harsh Sahelian sun and preserving the delicate taste. And these are not staying as fresh exports to be processed somewhere else for someone else's profit. They are trucked immediately to local processing facilities like Afridia Industries, where Burkinabe workers turn the fruit into high-value juices, and concentrate on national soil. The old climate maps are being rewritten in real time by Burkinabe hands. But perhaps the most visually stunning element of this entire revolution is something that should not exist at all by any conventional logic. Burkina Faso is farming fish in the desert. The country is completely landlocked, no coastline, no access to the sea. And yet the government looked at their man-made hydroelectric reservoirs, massive bodies of water like the Samandeni Dam, and saw something different from what everyone else saw. They saw floating fish farms. They dropped over 180 massive floating cages directly into the deep water of these reservoirs. Inside those cages, thousands of fish are being raised, fed, and harvested without Burkina Faso needing a single kilometer of coastline. The surface of these reservoirs literally boils as workers hurl feed into the nets, and the fish respond in a frenzy of activity. The target is 54,000 tons of fish annually. 54,000 tons. To supply that operation, the government commissioned 2 brand new multi-million-dollar state-owned fish feed factories, keeping the entire supply chain completely within Burkinabe hands, from the water, to the feed, to the cage, to the processing facility, to the market. Every step, sovereign. This is the formula that connects everything, not just one project, not just one sector, an entire ecosystem of food production where every link in the chain belongs to the same people. Here is something that tells you everything about how Traoré thinks. Burkina Faso owns nearly 71 million livestock animals. 71 million. That is one of the largest national herds in West Africa. And yet, historically, they were processing just 2% of their raw milk. 2%. The other 98% was either consumed immediately or lost to spoilage because they had no refrigeration infrastructure, no processing plants, no logistics network to get it from the cow to the consumer. The result? They were spending $50 million a year importing 70 million liters of powdered milk from European factories. Powdered milk, imported. While 71 million animals grazed on Burkinabe land. Traoré's response was the Faso Kosam initiative, a state-owned dairy enterprise built not as one vulnerable mega-factory, but as a decentralized network of high-tech processing hubs placed directly inside the major dairy regions. But processing plants need high-yield cows, and the local breeds were not producing enough volume. So what did Traoré do? He bypassed European suppliers entirely. In early 2025, the government imported 710 high-performance pregnant cows directly from Brazil. Tropical breeds, specifically selected for their ability to thrive in heat and produce massive milk volumes. These Brazilian genetics are now injecting over 1.2 million liters of high-quality milk into the Faso Kosam processing network every year. Burkinabe children are drinking fresh local milk instead of reconstituted European powder. The logic extends to poultry as well. Before 2025, Burkina Faso was importing day-old broiler chicks from France and Belgium every single year, paying over $1 million annually for the privilege. Traoré issued a total ban on foreign broiler chick imports in October 20, and then Burkinabe agricultural science delivered the answer. The poulet faso, a hybrid bird created by crossbreeding a selected local male line with highly productive females. Engineered to reach 1.1 kilograms in just 10 weeks, compared to 24 weeks for the old local breed, with hens producing up to 200 eggs per year. One citizen who started with 15 hens in 1996 as a high school student now operates a facility with 30,000 laying hens producing 20,000 chicks every single week. This is what happens when a government creates the conditions for its own people to grow. Now step back. Look at everything we have just walked through together. Solar-powered irrigation systems pumping nearly 10,000 cubic meters of water per hour in the Sahara. Wheat fields growing in a place where wheat was declared scientifically impossible. Apple trees in the desert. Coffee plants, strawberries, pineapples wrapped in paper bags against the Sahelian sun. 180 floating fish cages in a landlocked desert reservoir. Brazilian cows injecting 1.2 million liters of milk into a sovereign processing network. A new hybrid chicken engineered entirely in Burkina Faso. Cereals production exceeding 6 million tons annually. All rice imports halted. And now, connecting all of it. Rising from the architectural drawings of Burkinabe military engineers and civilian planners. The billion-dollar canal, a man-made waterway linking the great reservoirs of Burkina Faso, Bagré, Ziga, Samandeni, into a single unified artery, moving water from the humid south to the dying north, turning what the Sahel looks like today into what the Nile Valley looks like for Egypt. If fully executed, And the pace of everything else this government has accomplished suggests that if is becoming when, this canal will supply water to millions of hectares of land that currently produce nothing. It will create a permanent agricultural corridor through the Sahel. And with Mali and Niger cooperating as members of the Alliance of Sahel States, this could become a transnational water network, the greatest terraforming achievement in African history, built without a single IMF loan, built without a World Bank condition, built by Burkinabe hands, from Burkinabe gold, for Burkinabe people. But let me tell you what makes all of this feel different from every other grand infrastructure promise that Africa has heard before. It is the people. It is not the machine. It is not the gold revenue. It is not the engineering blueprints. It is the fact that when Traoré launched the Faso Mayabo, Build the Fatherland initiative, an 80-year-old grandmother heard about it on television and drove to a construction site with 2 bags of cement from her own savings. She did not send her son. She came herself. She wanted her own hands to carry those bags. She said, "I liked the initiative. That is why I made my contribution. I am really happy to be here and to contribute." A grandmother. 2 bags of cement. In her 80s. This is the spirit that built the pyramids, that connected the Nile, that crossed the Sahara in caravans. It is the spirit of people who understand that nobody is coming to save them, that the canal will not be dug by foreigners, that the rice fields will not be planted by multinational corporations, that the food on their children's plates will come from their own soil, watered by their own rivers, processed in their own factories, sold in their own markets. Over 4,600 VDP soldiers graduated from agricultural training programs in April 2026. 3,000 military engineers deployed to farmland alongside displaced families. 40 hectares of corn growing inside a prison. Students laying asphalt. Children molding pavement bricks. Mothers pushing wheelbarrows on construction sites. This is a national psychology that has been completely transformed, and it was transformed not by a speech, not by a slogan, not by a foreign development consultant's report. It was transformed by a young man in a red beret who showed up to the tomato fields himself, got his hands in the dirt, picked up bags of tomatoes and looked the farmers directly in the eye and said, "As long as we don't have food independence, we can't even talk about independence. Those who beg are always at the bottom." Let me be direct with you about something. The Western development establishment does not want this model to succeed, not because the model is wrong, but because the model is right, and it proves that the previous 60 years of foreign-dependent development were a choice, not an inevitability. When a U.S. general goes on camera to complain that Burkina Faso is misusing its own gold reserves being used to buy tractors and fertilizer for farmers, he is not expressing concern for the Burkinabe people. He is expressing alarm at a government that has found a way to break the dependency cycle. Because in the Western development system, and the general was correct about this in a way he did not intend, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Every loan comes with conditions. Every contract comes with profit extraction. Every infrastructure project funded from outside comes with a portion of the revenue flowing back out. Traoré cut all of those flows. He nationalized the mines. He redirected the revenue. He bought the tractors. He gave them away. No profit margin extracted. No debt service payment flowing to Geneva. No consulting fee going to London. The money stays. It circulates. It builds. And Mali and Niger are watching. The entire continent is watching. Because what Burkina Faso is building right now is not just a canal. It is a blueprint. A blueprint for what African sovereignty looks like when it stops being a speech topic and becomes an engineering project. Part 16, the dramatic finale. In just a few short years, this country has done what 60 years of foreign-dependent development could not. It has produced 6 million tons of cereals from its own soil. It has halted all rice imports. It has grown wheat where wheat was declared impossible. It has planted apple trees in the Sahara. It has raised fish in the desert. It has engineered its own chicken breed. It has imported Brazilian cattle genetics to build a sovereign dairy industry. It has handed out over $300 million in farm equipment, free of charge to farmers who were previously told they were on their own. And now, above all of that, it is designing and beginning to build a billion-dollar canal that will connect its great reservoirs into a single waterway, transforming millions of barren hectares into productive farmland and potentially creating the most significant water infrastructure project in West African history. None of this was supposed to happen. Every Western development model said it could not happen. Every financial institution that ever made Burkina Faso take out a loan to feed itself was, whether consciously or not, betting that this would never happen. But it is happening. Because one young captain in a red beret refused to accept the verdict. And because the people of Burkina Faso, the farmers, the soldiers, the engineers, the women, the students, the grandmothers carrying cement bags, refused to accept it with him. This is no longer just a canal project. This is not just an agricultural revolution. This is a nation rewriting the definition of what is possible. And the blueprint they are building, one rice field and one irrigation canal at a time, is one that the entire African continent is studying with the most intense focus. Because if Burkina Faso can do this, a landlocked nation at the edge of the Sahara, with no coastline, no sea access, fighting an active insurgency, under Western economic pressure, without a single IMF loan, then the question is no longer can it be done. The question becomes, why has it taken everyone else this long to start? The canal is coming. The Sahara is about to meet its match. This is arisen now, and the future is already being built.